Man fears time, but time fears the pyramids. An Arab proverb. Giza Plateau, Egypt. Here, in the desert just outside Cairo, stands the Great Pyramid of Khufu, the most impressive man-made structure on Earth. The Great Pyramid is the most wondrous place on Earth, and when you're standing in front of it, you are confronted with the greatest mystery of all time. The only original monument left of the original 7 wonders of the world, the Great Pyramid was created with impeccable mathematical precision and is a unique, mysterious feat of construction and engineering. But exactly how and why the pyramid was constructed remains a mystery. We may think that everything has been said about the Great Pyramid of Giza, but some unclear facts were dismissed by the mainstream Egyptologists. And not just that, it looks like we also missed the point. When it comes to the Great Pyramid of Giza, our first thoughts tend to relate to the sheer size of this massive structure. The Great Pyramid is rising to a height of 481 feet or 146.7 meters and boasting over a base of around 570,000 square feet or 173,736 square meters, which is the equivalent of 10 football fields. It consists of an estimated 2.3 million blocks that range in weight from 2 to up to 80 tons each, with a total mass of 6 million tons. However, many people are unaware that the Great Pyramid isn't only an architectural and engineering marvel, it is a geographical one too. It is located at the exact intersection of the longest line of latitude and the longest line of longitude. The impressive monument does flaunt its astounding accuracy when it comes to the alignment factor, as the Great Pyramid is the most accurately aligned structure ever created that we know of. The pyramid faces true north with a mere 3/60ths of a degree of error. That's a discrepancy of less than 0.06%. We are told that the most accurate north-oriented structure today is the Paris Observatory. However, even this is 6 arc minutes off from true north. It is assumed that when the Great Pyramid was initially raised, that it was precisely aligned with the North Pole, the position of which has shifted slightly over time. But this isn't even the most puzzling aspect of the geographical positioning of the pyramid. The Great Pyramid is not only perfectly aligned to the cardinal points, its placement on the Earth is seemingly intentional. Mainstream archaeologists and Egyptologists will tell you that the Great Pyramid was built sometime around 2500 BC as the burial tomb for the 4th dynasty Egyptian pharaoh Khufu, and was constructed over a 20-year period. There's only one problem. The Great Pyramid has none of the characteristics of tombs, including extravagant artifacts, ornate wall art, sealed entrances, elaborate coffins, or even mummies themselves. There's never been a body found inside the Great Pyramid. So who really built the Great Pyramid? Egyptians, or was it someone else? In this journey, we will seriously challenge mainstream historians by unlocking the secrets of the Great Pyramid. First of all, to construct such an amazing and significant achievement, the builders of the Great Pyramids would need to possess highly sophisticated knowledge of mathematics and geometry. They would need to know true dimensions of the Earth to extreme precision, and they would have to have exceptionally advanced technical instrumentation to site the Great Pyramid. Let's discuss further and more in detail this really astonishing feat. Before constructing the Great Pyramid, the builders raised a hillock to the ground and left a giant pivot in its center. Around this pivot, they cut 6-hectare bedrock to fit weird-shaped slabs, each one as heavy as a big car. Despite its significant construction, mainstream theories usually don't mention this first stage. Wonder why? The builders had to carry 130 granite blocks over 500 miles or 800 kilometers, with each block weighing between 2 and 80 tons. Then, those blocks had to be hauled up 210 feet or 64 meters, something which even today would be really hard to do. They piled up more than 2 million stones of different shapes and sizes, which is much harder than with similar blocks, and all of that with a precision that matches modern-day standards. The upper chamber is perfectly horizontal and vertical, and its precision overshadows modern tolerances. Some of the best structure engineers think that it would be too difficult for most builders to get anything that accurate. The Great Pyramid has only 3 chambers: the lowest chamber, the middle chamber, and the upper chamber, and they are ridiculously small given the monument's size. The masons built a passageway 300 feet or 94 meters long by 3 feet or 0.9 meters wide through the rocks with a breathtaking precision, and it opens onto the lowest chamber. With the descending passageway being narrow, the working conditions might have been drastic, and keeping this constant slope angle requires specific tools to keep the same and precise geometry. The Great Pyramid has stayed intact through at least 3 major earthquakes, the last of which flattened Cairo in the 13th century. And still, everything is in place and nothing was moved inside. The builders have oriented the Great Pyramid so precisely that it's pointing north within 5/100ths of a degree. To put this in context, using the same methods in the 17th century, we were 5 times less precise, as this precision has only been matched very recently in modern construction. There is also something that no mainstream theory mentions. The Great Pyramid actually has 8 sides, since each one is slightly bent, which extremely complicates the structure, since no 2 of those blocks are alike. To keep this 8-sided base on the 4 sides of the edifice during the construction with an accuracy down to the centimeter, even down to the millimeter, would be extremely difficult, and if we were going to build the same structure using modern technology, we would definitely be in trouble. Mainstream Egyptologists told us that the Great Pyramid was built over a 20-year period, and a quick calculation gives an idea of what that means construction-wise. 20 years, 365 days a year, 12-hour shifts with 2.3 million stone blocks. The result is one quarried, carved, lifted, and fitted block every 2.5 minutes. Sounds impossible? I would say so. Another thing, according to mainstream historians, since the builders came before the existence of wheels, iron or steel it was with copper chisels, stone mallets, hemp ropes, and a great deal of cleverness. Do you believe them when they say that was enough to build the last of the world's 7 wonders and the only one still visible today? So, it seems that they're trying to convince us that about 47 centuries ago, when the rest of the planet was pretty much walking around in animal skins, Masons were building the Great Pyramid of Giza. One limestone hillock raised to the ground, more than 6,000 hectare paving over a base area that is the equivalent of 10 football fields, over 2 million piled up blocks for an estimated mass of 6 million tons, a 42-story building high, a narrow 300 feet long passageway, utterly straight, driven through the rocks and running through the pyramid's body. 130 granite slabs lifted up to 210 feet and fitted to a 1/15 of an inch. 8 sides instead of 4. An outstanding earthquake-proof structure with a modern-day precision and orientation, and all of that achieved in only 20 years with this. Okay, let's go back to reality now and solve this puzzle. We need to go back and begin with the ancient empire where the Great Pyramid was built according to mainstream historians. For one of the most qualified Egyptologists, Professor Jean Leclant, the dates of Egyptian history can only be certified from 680 BC because that's when we managed to cross-check Egyptian archives with Roman and Greek ones, and everything before that is questionable. When it comes to the pyramid's construction, they have a lot of ideas, but no written account. They don't have any proper historical text, and we're left with assumptions, and nothing has been proven. Here's a parallel with some astonishing modern time projects, just to compare the scale and the time of completion. In 1964, one of the world's largest and most spectacular dismantling and reassembly projects was begun in Egypt to rescue the ancient temples in Abu Simbel from the waters of the Nile. The temples had to be relocated. The feat was accomplished through international collaboration using the leading-edge technology and tools ranging from handsaws to bulldozers and cranes. The entire site was carefully cut into large blocks, up to 30 tons, averaging 20 tons, dismantled, lifted and reassembled in a new location, 213 feet or 65 meters higher, and 656 feet or 200 meters back from the river. In one of the greatest challenges of archaeological engineering in history, in spite of cranes and trucks, it took 5 years to quarry and rebuild this temple made of 2,200 blocks, with the heaviest ones weighing 30 tons. 2,200 blocks, 5 years. 2 million blocks, 20 years, without cranes or trucks. The reason Egyptologists stick to this silly 20-year period of time is because if they acknowledge that a construction spans outlasting Cheops's length of reign, the tomb alibi would collapse, as it's unthinkable for mainstream historians that pyramids could have had another function. But if we check other ancient sites around the world, we would find these weird shaped blocks, and you need to ask yourself, why those shapes? It would be much easier to fit similar size and shape blocks as we do nowadays without needing to carve them. That remains the mystery, to build them without cement and just lay them side by side. Even a razor blade couldn't penetrate between two blocks. And here we can see the fitting structures reflect itself on each side of the passageway. Again, cutting and shaping those blocks as hard as tempered steel, with this and moving them without cranes to make them fit? What made them to create those weird shapes that complicated the task to the extremes? If you want the monument to stand strong, then the blocks must be heterogeneous, which means in different sizes and shapes, and that would prevent the wall from collapsing even during an earthquake. For example, the Great Pyramids would be much easier to build with only 4 sides instead of 8. But the builders knew that the 8-sided pyramid would be much stronger and able to withstand earthquakes. The Great Pyramid is an 8-sided figure, not 4 sides, and each of the pyramid's 4 sides are evenly split from base to tip by very subtle concave indentations. This discovery was made in 1940 by a British Air Force pilot named P. Groves as he was flying over the pyramid. Groves reportedly noticed the strange sight and took a photograph showing shadows that reveal the indentations. These subtle lines are only visible from above and at dawn and dusk on the spring and autumn equinoxes. This phenomenon occurs only twice a year during the equinoctial days. When the sun reaches the pyramid's angles for just a few seconds, the south side gets split in two. But it's really interesting to hear what mainstream historians think about it. They actually denied it. The expert of Egyptian antiquities, Hussein Abdel Basir, said that the sides of the Great Pyramid of Cheops are 4 sides and not 8. He said that was stated by some individuals who are obsessed with the ancient Egyptian civilization, and especially the Pyramid of Cheops, who tried to distort Egyptian antiquities with strange theories that have no scientific basis. And again, we see how mainstream's trying to dismiss something they don't like by making silly statements about it. Some of them said that wasn't made on purpose and that was a sheer accident during construction. If you ask any structural engineer about it, they would say it wasn't an accident. If that was the case, the building structure would have been all messed up with visible cracks everywhere. It was certainly intentional and the architect's choice, but not a single Egyptologist would acknowledge that. Why? Because it would imply that the Great Pyramid at this specific location with those precise shapes and dimensions would produce this phenomenon during the equinoxes, and that would be extremely hard for mainstream to explain given the basic tools they had at that time. What does the Great Pyramid of Giza have in common with Twitter and Pepsi? A quick answer: they're all designed using the golden ratio. Its dimensions are also based on the golden ratio. That is a mathematical ratio and is commonly found in nature, and when used in a design, it fosters organic and natural-looking compositions that are aesthetically pleasing to the eye. Over the centuries, a great deal of lore has built up around Phi, such as the idea that it represents perfect beauty or is uniquely found throughout nature. The Great Pyramid embodies an advanced knowledge of geometry, geodesy, the science of earth measurement, and astronomy. To suggest, as most Egyptologists do, that all of this is merely a matter of coincidence and chance is simply laughable. The length of the pyramid, including the corners of the building, is 365.242 cubits long. This happens to match Earth's days in a tropical year. Is that a coincidence? The Great Pyramid is almost immaculately oriented with the four cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west. Coincidence? The measurements of the length and width of the perimeter of the Great Pyramid correspond to exact fraction of both latitude and longitude measurements at the equator. Scaled up, this means the Great Pyramid directly corresponds to the circumference of the equator as well as the measurement from the equator to the pole, making it a scaled model of the northern hemisphere. It is only since the carrying out of the satellite surveys from space in the 1970s that scientists have obtained measurements of the Earth as accurate as those contained in the pyramid. That was the time when author William R. Fix made two new major discoveries about the pyramid that had led him to conclude the pyramid is virtually a mathematical scale model of the northern hemisphere of the Earth at the scale of 1 in 43,200, as first discovered by Professor of Ancient History Livio Catullo Staccini and published in 1971. Coincidence? If you take the location of the Great Pyramid as a coordinate, that number sequence of that coordinate matches exactly the speed of light traveling through space, measuring meters per second. And if we take the mass of the Great Pyramid at nearly 6 million tons and multiply it by a factor of 100 million, it gives you the overall mass of the Earth. Coincidence? According to mainstream, these are just coincidences. So, after all of this, what do you think? Who built the Great Pyramid? The Egyptians? If we ignore for a moment their primitive tools apparently used to achieve all this in the past as we know it, we also need to mention that if you think they would have to be able to measure the Earth, they would first had to know it was a sphere, which was not at all in their imaginations. The Egyptians thought the Earth was a square with mountains at the edge supporting the vault of the sky. So, again, who built it? And if it wasn't Cheapos's tomb, then what could it be? Let's just take its latitude positioning. Wouldn't just that be enough as a proof to consider that it was constructed by an advanced ancient civilization? When we decide everything else mentioned here, don't you think it would be more than enough to throw doubt on the ancient Egyptians ever having built the Great Pyramids of Giza? Don't you think the monument could have been built by a lost advanced civilization that would have completely disappeared? Given the possibility that many catastrophic level accidents could occur on Earth like continental drift, volcano eruptions, or major meteorite impacts, nothing keeps us from saying that more advanced civilizations might have lived on our planet. We will discuss some incredible things now, the facts that can be verified and mainstream can't deny them without evidence. For example, if for some reason our civilizations would disappear, Many things would survive for centuries, but not millennia. Only a few big monuments would, like the Great Pyramid of Egypt. To see the whole picture, we need to try to understand the way of their approach to all challenges facing this project. They measured the Earth and then designed a scale model after it in the shape of a pyramid in which scientific parameters were featured. They also seemed to be familiar with the speed of light. When you consider the vast amount of information about the Earth that's encoded into the Great Pyramid, you can't just dismiss all of it as pure coincidence. What if they tried to tell us or show us something? Something they knew would happen and needed to pass that information to us. It had to be a very important reason for them to put so much effort and build the most impressive man-made structure on Earth. What if the reason was to pass the message of utmost significance that will be readable thousands of years later? Let's try to read the message now. Each star in the universe moves 1 degree in every 72 years, and it takes 25,920 years to complete an orbit of the planet, which means a nearly 25,920 years span represents a precession of the equinox's cycle. The builders had precisely signaled the equinoxes that will be noticed by the next advanced civilization. The question is, why did they try to draw our attention to a critical astronomical cycle of our planet? Before we answer that question, you need to know that in order to precisely locate the Earth in the universe, modern astronomers use the zodiac constellations. They are simply the best way to observe the positions of the stars. In addition to that, one very interesting artifact found next to the Snefu Red Pyramid provided significant information. A rare Pyramidion, or the capstone, was found broken into pieces in the rubble by the pyramid and reassembled. Many experts have pointed out that the slope of the Pyramidion is different from that of the pyramid, and so it may never have been installed on the pyramid and may in fact be linked to a different monument. What's interesting for our story is that the Pyramidion has a side length of 3 and a circumference of 12 royal cubits at the same time, and the pi in it points to the 12 signs of the zodiac. The pyramid's 4 angles represent the 4 signs of the zodiac: Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. In the antique world, 4 stars were assigned to those 4 signs. 4 stars, Regulus in Leo, Aldebaran in Taurus, Antares in the Scorpio, and Fomalhaut in what was previously Aquarius. Today's astronomers assign it to Pisces. The constellation of these 4 stars always remains in the same, and so they can be used as eternal reference points. They are the brightest stars in their constellations, and the Persians considered these stars to be the 4 guardians of the heavens. They marked the seasonal changes, the equinoxes, and solstices. One axis shows from Taurus to Scorpio. The other axis is Lee, Aquarius axis, or Leo angel, and shows from Aquarius to Leo. The Sphinx, as a statue of a lion with a human head, lies exactly in the star field of Leo. The Sphinx is a symbol of Angel Leo's axis of the pyramid, a human head on a lion's body. According to the mainstream theory, although many geologists disagree, the Sphinx was built after the Great Pyramid, and those 2 monuments wouldn't be correlated. That theory can be challenged by simple geometry. The triangle proportion to the Great Pyramid, but 5 times bigger, links its summit to the smalls on one side, and on the other goes through the Sphinx head. Coincidence? Maybe, but if we outline a squared base of the Great Pyramid and make it slide against it, then the axis running through the right side hits against the Sphinx head at the same spot. Another coincidence? Again, maybe. But then if we trace a circle whose center is the junction between the axis and this one running through the two pyramid summits, then we again hit the Sphinx head at the exact same spot. Another coincidence? Don't think so. There's simply no way that the precise positioning of the Great Pyramid was due to chance. After analyzing all the information, the conclusion is that the Giza Plateau was an astronomical clock. An astronomical clock with 4 steady reference points. Those 4 stars. But how can we know where the starting point is? The Sphinx gaze. This clock's needle turns around itself in a bit less than 25,920 years and precisely point to the Earth's position in this big cycle. The pointer can be seen as the line of sight in the Sphinx. After 26,000 years, it now looks back at the original constellation of the sky. At the chest of the Sphinx, there is a rocky promontory called the Heart Curvature. In Arabic, it is called Al-Qalb al-Asad, the lion's heart, and this is also the Arabic name for the brightest star Regulus in the constellation Leo. In Arabic, the Sphinx is called Abu el-Hul, father of horror, and this could indicate the meaning that when his eyes look at Regulus again, a new cycle of world time begins, and that's the starting point of a new cycle. So whatever mainstream historians say, they can't deny these facts. This clock works perfectly. After decoding what the Giza Plateau was, it's time to go back to the question, why a reference to this cycle change, which also corresponds to the outer cycle of the Maya, Veda, and astrology calendars, and thus the galactic conjunction every 25,920 years. To answer that question, we need to dig deep into ancient writings, myths, legends, and beliefs of many different cultures and look for the connection. This cycle of 25,920 and at its low of around 13,000 years can be attributed to the floods and fires that occur in myths and legends of historical, biblical, and Indian sources. The ancient Greeks also report recurring endings of the world every 12 to 13,000 years, and they coincide with Plato's descriptions of the fall of Atlantis, and even Aristotle pointed to worldwide revolutions and upheavals that take place in times that are fixed in the stars of heaven. So the reports and warnings in the old texts now correspond to our most modern findings. If the builders of the Giza complex knew this, the old texts would make sense, not as prophecies, but as scientific predictions that we should pay attention to. And now at the end, when we put it all together, what does seem clear is that the ancient builders used these enigmatic constructions to warn us against the cyclic, unpredictable, catastrophic events that could destroy the entire civilization, that thousands of years later, we wouldn't even remember them. Whatever the nature of this cycle was, it seems to have been of such importance that the ancients would design and later build a monumental astronomical clock that could withstand time itself, in order that the cyclical timing knowledge it contains could be passed down to their descendants, allowing them to plan and prepare for the arrival of this cycle ahead of time. Even though we found some answers, but critical questions still remain unanswered. What happened to them? And what will happen to us when another cycle of equinox completes? Official Egyptology attempts to attribute all prehistoric structures and ruins found in Egypt to the pharaohs according to its conceptual worldview. However, the differences between the anonymous megalithic and the heavily inscribed pharaohic structures are obviously and scientifically documented. This does not diminish their enormous building performance and wonderful ancient Egyptian culture in any way. On the contrary, it makes the place even more meaningful. In order to do true justice to the legacy of the ancient civilizations, these unique megalithic complexes would have to be investigated again in an unbiased manner. The most important prerequisite for this is interdisciplinary research of the Giza complex, so that these legacies can be preserved and studied for the benefit of the entire human race. But the biggest problem with that would be to obtain the research approval from the Supreme Council of Antiquities, the government body responsible for the conservation, protection, and regulation of all antiquities and archaeological excavations in Egypt. Why? Because they will not approve any projects that contradict mainstream image of Egyptology. They need to understand that the Giza legacy belongs to the whole humanity, along with the above ground, which have already been declared a World Heritage Center. If there is any mystery to ancient Egypt, it is why a paradigm that was established 130 years ago still holds force among many Egyptologists and archaeologists. Thank you for watching, and hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. We really hope you subscribe, and if you'd like to be notified of future releases, just hit the bell button. Leave a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are on all of this and what topics you'd like to explore in our future videos.